do that. All right, we are good to go. So just a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. So as a reminder, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to either use the raise hand feature, which is going to be in the bottom bar across your screen under reactions. If you'd like to ask a question verbally, or if you want to drop a question in the chat box, that's fine as well. We are going to be kind of doing a little bit of a recap from our session last week. Just I know we have a couple of folks who weren't able to join us. So we're going to do that briefly, and then we're going to move on to the content for this week, which includes some additional work on the scenario planning activity that we started last week. So I'm going to drop that file in the chat again as well. Just again, as a quick reminder for everybody, when you go to open that document, just make sure that you download it first before trying to edit the document within Google Drive, because we don't want a lot of people editing one document. That would be a mess. So just please make sure when you hover over the file, in the upper right-hand corner of the file, there's a download icon. Just click that to download it, and then you can edit to your heart's content. All right, I think that's everything. So without further ado, I'm going to start our slide deck for today. And today's presentation is going to be primarily presented by Ricardo Guardiola, who's going to introduce himself here in a moment. But I always like to review just a little bit about Decision Associates for anybody who may not be familiar with us. So we are a business consulting firm located here in Erie, Pennsylvania. And there's a variety of different services that we offer that are listed along the right-hand side. There's some other things that aren't mentioned there, some general HR consulting work that we do with HR audits and training, functional audits. We also do one-on-one coaching is kind of encompassed in that training and development piece. But more importantly, we're celebrating 40 years in business this year, which is super exciting. And that's our team up there in the photo. And we also underwent a little bit of a discussion process internally and some strategic planning to identify and update our mission statement and vision statement. So you can see those reflected there. But again, just like last week, thank you for joining us, because as you know, we like to work with growth-minded organizations, and our topic for this series, which is strategic foresight and being more purposeful about how you plan for your organization's future, that requires being growth-minded, right? So we're very excited to have you with us for this series. And that said, I'm going to just quickly show you the agenda for today and the areas that we're going to cover. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ricardo so he can introduce himself.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. I hope everyone is having a swagalicious start to the week. We'll keep the momentum going by going over this webinar together so that we can continue producing value-producing work for a winning end of the week. Reiterating my promise to all of you, by the end of our three-part webinar series, you'll have the know-how needed to develop a game-changing strategic foresight function. A strategic foresight capability that's aligned to your organization's most consequential and pivotal business decisions and priorities for 2024. In the first session, we touched upon why being able to anticipate change is so important and critical to exceeding our objectives. By enabling change and anticipating it ahead of time, we can get to our destination faster and with greater precision. Strategic foresight, if you will, is like the fuel and the navigational system propelling us to our destination. So in today's session, we'll continue on that narrative and continue building a blueprint specific to you and your organization, tailored to achieve outcomes such as being able to accelerate market expansion, develop standout solutions, optimize ROI from your go-to-market investments, and future-proofing success with adaptable growth projections. Earlier this morning, I looked at the flight path for the longest commercial flight in the world. It's an 18-hour flight from New York City to Singapore. And what I noticed is that there's 3 widely different flight paths that the pilot can take depending on the climate and the conditions. And just like the pilot can choose between three wildly different paths to reach their destination, today we'll be going over the 4 key steps needed for us to identify the best flight path for your organization's 18-month flight plan to reach our destination based off of the forecasted conditions, using the agenda that we went over as our flight barometer for this session. So a little bit more about me for anyone who is not on the first series webinar call with us. My passion is building forward-looking models that we can use to anticipate change accurately and fast enough to build a competitive advantage. I have over 10 years of experience starting, scaling different competitive intelligence and foresight functions. The 4 kind of most value-add accomplishments that I'm proud of is being able to help a manufacturer double their value during an M&A transaction in an industry seen as declining by the mass media and industry experts. The second one relates to being able to proact a supplier becoming a competitor 3 years before it happened, letting the company have a 3-year notice to retain sales and develop new competitive advantage that resonated within their specific niche in the marketplace. The third one has to do with expanding into best fit new industry verticals and geographies, such as an automotive supplier needing to get into defense work in alternative fuels, or on the B2C side, maybe there's a mental health product that needs to be cross-sold to the sports and fitness industry. The 4th standout accomplishment that I'm proud of that I'll share here on the About Us is navigating through regulatory change when 80% of the competitors failed. These 4 different examples will go over the proprietary 4-step process that any organization can use to start building foresight today. And that's important because within the strategic foresight community, there's many narratives out there that it takes months or years of investment in strategic foresight or competitive intelligence or even market research to start seeing value. And kind of my counterpoint to all that is actually, a well-defined scope, especially in a small and medium-sized business environment, needs to be able to start producing value within 10 hours. We can't wait 3 months or 3 years to start seeing value from the program. And just like many companies recognize that having a better sales team, a better marketing engine, or a more technical product are all sources of competitive advantage, here what we'll be learning about is how to make the ability to anticipate change faster than competitors early enough to make a difference can also be a formal source of competitive advantage. Long term, before we get on to the next slide, the goal that me and a few others in my field are trying to get to is certifying competitive intelligence and strategic foresight. Just like there's the legal field and the medical field and the consumer financial advising fields, they're all certified through a board. A key challenge within the strategic foresight industry is that today anybody can say that they're an analyst and that they provide strategic foresight. What we're moving towards in the strategic foresight community is a certification program where anybody that's interested in strategic foresight can look us up, have a license number, and look at our batting average, so to speak. How accurate have our projects been in the past? Within my lifetime, that's what I hope to achieve within the strategic foresight community. So let's move on. So what is strategic foresight? My 1-sentence explanation at charity galas and at different conferences I attend to is that it's about creating forward-looking decision models that we can use to anticipate change early enough to build a competitive edge. That's it. It's said a different way on this slide, using information about the future to anticipate opportunities and challenges and better prepare for change. Gives us the ability to be 4 steps ahead of our competition. So let's unpack this a little bit. So most companies are already doing strategic foresight in some shape, form, or fashion. Either informally as part of executive conversations, or maybe it's also being pursued independently in different company functions such as marketing, sales, and product development. What's key to understand here for strategic foresight is distinguishing nice to know information from need to know information to drive decision-making and anticipate change. A lot of companies, when they try to implement strategic foresight for the first time, they go heavy on investing into a lot of tools and building almost a Wikipedia light about a repository of competitor and market dynamics. But over the past 10 to 15 years, that has proven to be not a really great source of ROI. But what is a great source of ROI is being able to implement the 4-step framework that we'll be going over today that can be applied for companies and organizations of all sizes and industries, from nonprofits to private sector companies, from pre-revenue startups to small and medium-sized businesses to big markets to Fortune 500 companies. I've been fortunate enough to be in the center of all of this, and I'm excited to see how it can apply to your organization as well. Moving on. So here, let's take a moment to evaluate where we're at using this bridge metaphor. There's a gap between the current state and the future state. VUCA is a common term in the academic and scientific community. It typically stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. What I like to say is that VUCA, we can transform it to mean vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. How do we go about doing that, though? It starts by asking one fundamental question. What are the 3 biggest challenges our organizations face today and over the next few years? When we've had time to ponder that question, naturally we start to think about what would it be worth to solve these future problems? And then finally, what is impossible to do today, but if it could be done, would fundamentally change the organization? So within this metaphor on the left-hand side, the organizational decision-making capabilities are relying on things such as baseline intuition, incomplete information, and unconfirmed rumors from the marketplace, from salespeople or from competitors to guide decisions. Whereas on the right, we're sustainably building an insights engine to navigate our most pivotal decisions. And what's the gap? How do we get from current state to future state? By solidifying purpose and vision, identifying opportunities and our sources of competitive advantages, and being able to satisfy market wants better than anyone else, not only existing market wants, but emerging ones, and being able to call them out and make the proper adjustments and investments before they happen. Well, I'm going to spend a few minutes here talking about how strategic foresight is different from market and competitive research. Because by now, let's see, I've been in the field for 12 years, let's say. Initially, going into it, most companies never heard of strategic foresight. But now the conversation is changing, where many companies and organizations have either heard of strategic foresight, but haven't tried implementing it before, or they tried implementing it, but they got rid of it because they weren't getting the ROI that they were looking for. So over this slide and the next, we're going to go over the 5 key things that are needed and that truly distinguish strategic foresight from market and competitive research. The first one has to do with it being a decision-making blueprint or a navigational tool that provides a range of best fit options for both short-term and long-term choices. What we mean here is that at any given time, there's multiple opportunities that we're faced with every day, every week, and every year, but we can't possibly go after all of them and hope to be competitive. We have to narrow down on the top 1 to 5 areas where we truly feel we can become market leader and be the number 1 or number 2 supplier within that specific industry or niche. So as a decision-making tool, strategic foresight enables us to evaluate these decisions in close to real time and have the insights be always paired to the decision. Before any strategic foresight initiative or deliverable starts, it needs to delineate what decisions are we actually supporting and how is the data going to help us inform the decision. The second one relates to present and to future wins. Many times implementing strategic foresight initiatives, we start with the long-term view of what are the opportunities 2 to 3 years from now that we can start building now. But that's not enough, because we also need to bridge the gap from here to there. It's great if we can identify opportunities that exist for our organizations 3 years from now, but we need to win sales today. We need to figure out how can we get from our existing capabilities and our existing sources of revenue and cross-sell and upsell our way to the emerging futures that are the best fit for us, based off of not only the potential of the market, but also our ability to serve and the challenges needed to overcome them. The third one speaks to transparent and adaptable methods. And this is the one that I champion the most. I think that any provider of foresight, insight, competitive intelligence, market research should be able to give their step-by-step process in a reproducible fashion. What do I mean by that? In the scientific community, reproducibility is a series of steps that someone else can be handed to, and they should be able to go through that checklist and perform the research or the exercise or the function and come up with a similar result. I equate it to a Michelin star chef. A Michelin star chef has a recipe. Lots of people in the strategic foresight space are hesitant on sharing their methodology or their step-by-step process. But I'm an advocate for sharing it for reproducibility and also for making better decisions, because maybe there's an assumption or a weight that needs to be changed to come up with a better recommendation. But just as we talk about Michelin star chefs, I'm not a cook, I'm not a chef. A Michelin star chef can give me the recipe and I can reproduce it, but it won't come out like the Michelin star chef plate because I'm not a chef. So this just goes to show us that I'm not really concerned about someone trying to take the step-by-step process and trying to necessarily copy it, because this is something that requires expertise and know-how to help navigate as well. And the best way to do that is by complementing the deep subject matter industry expertise that exists within organizations and amplifying it with the methodological expertise of strategic foresight implementation. We'll go on to the next slide. So 4, it has to be comprehensive, combining data from all sources and departments showing all potential paths and opportunities and challenges. This is very important because oftentimes when we judge the opportunity or the challenge that a specific market represents, we think about it and forecast about it in terms of sales dollars. Market A is a $50 billion market. Market B is a $30 billion market. Market C is a $10 billion market. But we have to go back and define what defines market opportunity. Sales revenue, potential sales revenue from a market is only one of the many variables that we have to look at. And we also have to take into consideration external factors like how many prospects exist, what the revenue potential is, but also internal variables like our capacity and our ability to serve. Many times when doing strategic foresight projects, we determine that even though market B might be $30 million, market A might be $50 million, but market B is still a better fit for us because of our ability to service them. And then the 5th one has to do with realistic data approaches, where a model has to be evaluated by its ability to support decision-making. And there's lots of crazy statistical techniques that exist out there that are really fun to work with, but they presume that all of the data is complete or accurate, that there's no chance of deception. But when dealing with market and competitor variables, the methods that we employ have to take into consideration that not all of the data that exists out there is going to be 100% accurate or complete, especially now with artificial intelligence, where by 2026, up to 90% of the content generated online is going to be artificially generated. So that's something to keep into consideration as well. So overall, what is the market problem that strategic foresight helps solve? It helps solve the risk of competitive disadvantages or missing market opportunities by not being able to accurately call the future. And at a very high level, examples of this could be things like Sears or the taxi industry, where they were outpaced by companies like Amazon and like Uber. They were great companies and they had a solid offering, but they failed to adapt to the emerging marketplace. Move on. So here we talk about, again, how strategic foresight empowers organizations with forward-looking models to build a competitive edge. Now on to the 4-move advantage. This is down where we get to the nitty-gritty on the 4 steps and what each of them entails. A few different variables that we have to look at here first relate to predict. Predict is understanding customer wants and needs. This speaks to being able to identify emerging customer needs to either enter a new market or accelerate entry into an existing market. Many times we come across a few different viable market segments that are all suitable candidates for growth, but we need to figure out and determine which truly reflect the best fit where we can win, evaluating not just emerging demand, market potential, but also ability to serve. So there's one set of models that specifically dedicate to identifying and understanding emerging customer wants and being able to map them and score them appropriately. The second one here, proact, relates to being able to delineate different kinds of competitor capabilities to build a standout service and new emerging white spaces. The kind of variables that we will talk about relate to 4 different classes of variables. The first one is called game changers. Second one is called creating advantage. Third being challenged, and fourth qualifiers. So a game changer is a capability that's a source of competitive differentiation and advantage, both today and tomorrow. A creating advantage capability is something that's not necessarily differentiated today, but it will be tomorrow. An example of this would be the video streaming industry back in 2014, where things like being able to stream into 4K resolution was considered to be a source of advantage, but the relevance of original content didn't really come into play until Disney Plus transitioned from being a supplier to the video streaming industry to being a competitor. And companies like Netflix that were able to call that 3 years in advance were able to build their own library of original content to stay relevant. The third one here speaks to the perform step, where here we're evaluating which are the best areas to focus on. Many times marketing, sales, product development teams, they're spread out too thin across too many different initiatives, and performance allows us to focus on the 1 to 5 that will truly resonate and move the needle. And then fifth, outpacing, being able to adapt to new scenarios before they occur. So many times we'll have a forecasted pipeline that we feel great about based off of existing growth. And that's precisely the best time to invest in foresight when the organization is ahead. Many times strategic foresight use cases come into play by an established market leader that's been successful for a long time, but their primary industry segment is mature and they need to expand out somewhere else. Or they've been blindsided by a competitor move and they want to figure out how to get back on track to outpace the competition. These are both reactive and they're both very viable use cases. But the strongest point of strategic foresight is to pursue it from a position of strength where everything's going well. We're growing 25, 50% year over year. We have a forecasted pipeline of, let's say, $100 million a year or $50 million a year. And what can we do? What are some of the trends that we need to keep track of to make sure that we can stay on point or make course corrections as necessary to exceed our targeted goals? So omitting any of these steps will eventually lead to issues on not being able to future-proof business, typically by 2 of the pain points that I discussed, where either the market matures enough and it will not grow past the rate of inflation, so we need to find a new market, or there was a surprise in the marketplace that could have been proactively detected if this 4-move advantage system was implemented. And the nice thing about strategic foresight and my thesis statement of 10 hours is that if an organization has a systemic approach to predicting, proacting, performing, and outpacing, they really don't have to spend any more time or resources thinking about anticipating the future because everybody else will be trying to keep up with them. We're going to go over each of the 4 steps in the context of a lemonade stand and a lemonade stand example. So first one here relates to predict, figuring out what customers want from a curbside refreshment provider to develop a buy, build, or a partner strategy to satisfy customer needs. Within this particular case, predicting would have shown that, would have evaluated the lemonade stand against other viable market segments. Does the market truly want a lemonade stand? Perhaps we also needed to evaluate lemonade stands, but also candy, art, dog walking, and other potential sources of revenue. The lemonade stand example allows us to think about also about applying strategic foresight versus market research from the standpoint of this isn't just we're going to start a lemonade stand today and start selling tomorrow, but we've had this plan that we've implemented over the past 12 months to build a differentiated recipe that can accelerate our time to absorb our cost and build a profit. And that speaks also here to step 2 of deciding what kind of stand to produce and how to make it better than competitors, such as being able to add value on options, such as unique flavor syrups, including vitamins or energy enhancements, crazy straws, popping boba, and more. The choice of the options are informed by the insights from the analysis in the ProAct process, where we're looking at the competitive landscape, what other lemonade stands and adjacent industry options are providing, and looking at white space to see how can we stand out against competitors. We'll move on to step 3. So perform. This speaks to being able to pick a location strategically, focusing on the most important customers where they're likely to be. Is it going to be outside of a gym? It's going to be around a running track or a playground. Being able to perform and evaluate customer segments and opportunity. We can do this geospatially, such as this example, where and what cities and what states and which countries and which avenues where our best customers be. And we can also take a look at it in terms of buyer personas or industry verticals. Maybe there's a specific mental health angle that we need to take, or sports and fitness, or another buyer persona that we need to invest into to outperform the local lemonade stand market. And then step 4. So outpacing. Here we speak to keeping an eye out for anything that might change the demand of our product. If the weather is cold, for instance, there might be more demand for hot lemonade tea with honey inside versus a cold lemonade. And this also speaks to keeping a pulse on regulatory changes, as well as deciphering competitor moves and advantages from the standpoint also of not only looking at the market data, but also being able to decipher the capability and the intent of our competitors and of the regulatory landscape and of the customer base as well, to make sure we're on top of mind for them. So here we're going to go, are we going to go into breakout groups, Amanda?
I think we've got a smaller group with us today, so I think we could probably just stay here. So this is going to be calling back to last week where we started some work on your scenario planning document, which is the document that I dropped a link to in the chat at the beginning of the session. So if you haven't downloaded that yet, I recommend you doing that. For those of you who were with us last week, if you want to pull up the document that you were working on last week, now that we've given you a little bit more information about strategic foresight and how to think about those 4 different steps that Ricardo just walked you through, we want you to think about and reflect a little bit on the 2 questions on the screen. So first of all, and for those of you who did not do the activity last week, perfect time to start. It's great because there is some explanation provided as well as a sample completed scenario planning framework on the document that I dropped in the chat. So if you want to take a look at that, feel free to do it. But for those of you who worked on it last week, now that you have a little bit better understanding of what strategic foresight is, what, if anything, would you change about your scenario planning matrix? So were there any scenarios that you identified last week that are seeming like they've changed in some way, or that you might want to make some additions to the document, or maybe you've realized, oh, some of the things that we identified last week as, really important that are coming down the pipeline maybe aren't so important and you need to reprioritize. So just take a look and think about, is there anything you want to change? And then what additional trends come to mind when you think about strategic foresight through the lens of that lemonade stand example? So as Ricardo really clearly spelled out for you, each of the 4 steps, now that you have a better understanding what each of those 4 steps is, are there any other trends that come to mind, whether it's something that would help you stand out from your competition or serve your market more effectively? Think about that a little bit. And if you need to make, again, additions or changes to that scenario planning document, feel free to do that. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen. Ricardo, is there anything else you want to add before we give them a few minutes to work on this?
Yes, the cheat sheet is always to pair the trends to decisions that are being made. So in the 4-step process that we went over, predict, proact, perform, and outpace. Predict speaks to accelerating market expansion, market entry. Proact speaks to building competitive standout solutions, product development, etc. Perform the specific industry verticals, buyer personas, and other go-to-market considerations that we're going to invest in. And outpace, being able to make corrective action. Each of these can feed into different business questions and decision points that we'll be revisiting after this scenario planning exercise, but that's also a potential brainstorming opportunity for this scenario.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. So just as a reminder, if you haven't downloaded that document that I dropped in the chat yet, please take a moment to do that. And what do you think, Ricardo? Maybe 10 minutes to work on this? Does that sound
11
like
and
a
a half.
plan? 11 and a half. Perfect. All right, so how about this? How about I set my timer for 10 minutes? You all have a chance to chat about this. If for those of you who are sitting in a room with other people, or if you want to work on this by yourself, feel free to do that as well. And then we'll check in with you at the 10-minute mark. And if you need a minute or 2 or a minute and a half to wrap things up, you can feel free to do that. So setting my timer for 10 minutes, and we will check back with you here at the end of that time. Oh, also, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself to ask, or if you want to drop them in the chat for me or for Ricardo, feel free to do that too. All right, everybody, that's time. Are you all good to go, or do you need a little bit more time? I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you're not ready to move on. All right, I'm not hearing any wild protests, so go ahead and move on. From that activity, would anyone like to share if there were any changes that you decided to make, or things that you are thinking about a little bit differently now that you've got a little bit more of an in-depth description of strategic foresight? So I know a crew from American Tinting and Galvanizing, I know you guys were working on this last week and came up with some great thoughts on trends and things that you want to keep an eye on. So any changes to that work that you did last week, or any updates that you made after today's explanation?
I mean, not like fully. We're gonna focus. Our top trend was government regulations on air and water,
Mhm.
which is still pretty much.
Yeah, that's gonna be an issue when it's over.
Mhm.
Our plans for all that. All 3 of those are gonna stay, and then also there's one that we would have added, which is called a recession.
Okay,
Everyone in this place knows about recessions.
sure.
We're recession proof, but we're really not.
Okay, excellent. Any other thoughts from anyone else on the call? All right, very good. So this is an exercise that we would encourage you to, continue revisiting and continue looking at as you have new information or as you become aware of, different things that are coming down the pipeline, just that are going to impact your business, whether in a positive way or a negative way. So that the scenario planning document that we provided to you, that's something that we would encourage you to keep using. Um, and something that you can always go back and edit and add to and take things off of as you progress through planning for what lies ahead. So with that, Ricardo, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yes, so this decision tree goes over where the best place to start is based off of where applying strategic foresight will have the best value add for the organization based off of the existing challenges and priorities. And the way to kind of think about this top level question is reflecting on the organization's most pressing challenges, potential future hurdles, and the quote unquote impossible opportunities. Where is it that applying strategic foresight can provide the most value? And it's based off of the decision points that the organization is considering. The 4 steps relate to the nature of 4 different kinds of business decisions. If an organization is looking to enter or expand into market segments based off of customer needs and the desirability of a segment, this speaks to the predict step, navigating where to compete, whether it's a build, merge, or partner, and which best fit adjacencies to grow into. And the word recession was a keyword in my mind because a recession can be general, and it can also be specific to certain industry sectors. And just like how an industry overall could be growing at 10% or 15% or 5%, there are pockets within industries or pockets within the economy that are either outperforming the average or underperforming the average. And that's something very important to keep in mind as well for any of these steps. How can we identify if we're outperforming, underperforming, or in line with the average? And then ideally, how can we then figure out what we have to do to outperform the average, whether it's a recession, a growing industry sector, or a declining industry sector? How can we leverage it so that even maybe in a declining industry sector, our positive growth rate is still a positive number and also above that of our competitors? So that's predict. The second nature of the decisions relates to proact. Do you need to guidance and solution development to ensure market differentiation? This speaks to building, develop, and owning solution white space, differentiating products and services, and countering competitive activity. Whereas industries converge and the lines between suppliers, competitors, and customers become harder to delineate from each other, it's important for the solution and the product roadmap to have a way that truly stands out relative to the competition. And Proact speaks to a solution for being able to do so. The third nature questions have to do with, okay, maybe we've already decided which market segments we need to go after, but we need to decide where within those segments we should focus our efforts, either from a geographical point of view or from the point of view of industry verticals or use cases, where perhaps we've decided that aerospace or alternative fuel or satellite communications is the way forward. But then within that, there's an ecosystem of over 10,000 different kinds of suppliers and potential customers. So then we need to score and narrow down which of those make the most sense for us, not only based off of the potential, but also the challenge and the ability to serve. And then aligning those options across all of the go-to-market options within the company, across marketing, sales, and product, so that the entire organization is aligned on the best fit options for emerging growth. And then the last nature decisions have to do with anticipating and preparing for all potential future scenarios that could impact the business. Perhaps a company already has a great idea and is happy with their market segmentation, their product development roadmap, and where they're growing and performing. But then we need to build a navigation system to factor in course corrections. And the best time to do this is when a company is at the top of their game, to be able to counter plausible futures and competitive activity, not only from current existing competitors, but also emerging options. Because in any industry, somewhere out there in a dorm room or in a garage, people are continuing to innovate, hoping to displace this generation's market leaders with next generation emerging disruptors. And it's very possible for today's market leaders to outpace these individuals by building a competitive solution set, or maybe it makes sense to partner or buy them out entirely, depending on the nature of the industry and the organization. So those are the four, this decision tree goes over the 4 steps and the best place to start. Again, relying on the most pressing challenges, potential future hurdles, and what it could mean for the organization to achieve the opportunities that are considered impossible today. So to kind of summing up today's session, hopefully we've distinguished strategic foresight from market research. We've defined strategic foresight as being able to anticipate opportunities and challenges better, to anticipate change fast enough and early enough to make a competitive difference before it becomes obvious to competitors in the marketplace. Market research is data gathering information about customers' needs and preferences. Strategic foresight is about putting all insights across emerging and existing opportunities into a decisioning model and basing it based off of the immediate wins needed today and the long-term winnings to ensure sustainable growth and leadership, as well as being able to anticipate data sources from all the different market sources and factor in the capability and the capacity for deception and misinformation, and bubbling this all up to help support the most consequential organizational decisions facing the business. As Amanda touched on, it's best to constantly reevaluate the worksheet in real time, especially now in 2024. It doesn't take expensive software to keep track of trends. There's free RSS feeds and Google alerts that can be made to flag indicators that maybe this is something we need to take into consideration more closely. Or if we want to achieve our growth number for the year over the next 3 years, there's these set of indicators that can help us decide if we need to revise them or change our strategy to make sure that we can still obtain them effectively. We can use the decision tree to plan where you should start to build a value-producing strategic foresight within 10 hours. And next week, we'll all go over exactly how each of those 4 steps work in practice and what an example output and visualization looks like based in response to a question. We'll be using real examples, but with anonymized company names for confidentiality reasons and such.
Awesome. Thank you, Ricardo. So again, our contact information is up here on the screen. Feel free to reach out if you have questions after today's presentation. Just again, a couple of notes for next week. So you've probably noticed by now, if you attended last week, that these sessions are kind of building on each other. So next week, we're going to be talking through a little more in depth about the 4 steps and kind of how to determine which step is most appropriate for what you're looking to accomplish in your organization. And then we're also going to talk through, because as Ricardo said, you know, a lot of times it's best to find someone to partner with you on this, someone who has that expertise with strategic foresight and can really help point you in the right direction to the solutions that are going to make the most sense for you. So we want to help you understand exactly what to look for when you're looking for a partner for strategic foresight, the questions that you should be asking, the information you should be requesting to make sure that you're engaging with the partner that's going to be the best fit for you and for what you need. And to make sure they're also a legitimate partner, because there are, especially with topics that are hot topics, you find there are a lot of people joining the marketplace offering that service that maybe don't have the expertise that they should to deliver that service. So we want to make sure that you steer clear of those folks and you find the right ones to partner with. So we're going to help you figure out exactly how to do that. Again, as always, information for you to connect with Decision Associates, our LinkedIn page, our Facebook page our website, and then that QR code in the upper right-hand corner will direct you to our LinkedIn, our website, and to sign up for our email newsletter, which goes out quarterly. Next issue will be out in June. So make sure you sign up for that if you are not already, and keep an eye out for that coming here in a couple of months. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed today's session, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.